Well, the next speaker, just an awesome man. I'm going to keep it short. I had something written up, but we all know him and love him. He's a great guy. Little Shelter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the kind introduction. I really appreciate it. I can't even begin to tell you, folks, how grateful I am to be back in Moultrie County. I think it's been 18 years. And I've never forgotten how kind you folks have been to my family and me, and I never will forget it. Jo couldn't be here tonight. She's doing some things with our Foundation for Abused Children. To be back in the presence of Bill ran my first campaign back in the early 1980s. So Billy, I'll never forget that and how important you were to me and what a great Democrat you've been for this party over the years. Julie, we did have a great team, didn't we? Me and you and Penny, by golly, we gave them hell. Well, you know, there's this, I don't know, maybe it's just a rumor, but some of his staff has let it out that they actually got Mr. Trump out campaigning door to door last year. And it's told that he walked into this yard and there was a little circle of boys sit there in the yard, 7 or 8 kids, little dog in the middle. And Trump said, what are you boys doing? And the one boy said, well, we're telling lies. And the one that tells the biggest lie gets a dog. So Trump said, well, now you know you shouldn't be doing that. He said, it's wrong to tell a lie. I was your age, I never told a lie. The little boy said, give him the dog. I think that's a true story. Well, Illinois has problems. We all know that, right? You heard about the 2 guys sitting in prison eating supper? And one looked over at the other and said, you know, the food was a lot better in here when you were governor. Well, it's true, but we're going to change that. We have a wonderful guy running for governor. We've got several wonderful people running for governor. But I've known J.B. Pritzker for a long, long time. I've examined all the credentials for a great governor candidate, and among all the candidates. And I can tell you, when it comes to creating jobs, he has no equal. Tens of thousands of jobs that he's created with his own company. You look at his plan for all of Illinois, not just Chicago, but downstate Illinois. His plan to rebuild the infrastructure for job training, to invest in all of our people. And there's no doubt in my mind that he has the experience in the background to create jobs in this state like none of the other candidates. His commitment, along with his wife, to education, particularly early childhood education, no question that he supersedes all of the other candidates. There is a reason why Mr. Pritzker has been endorsed by the statewide AFL-CIO, the Chicago Federation of Labor, and tens of hundreds of locals all over the state, because he's been there for union men and women when he created the jobs. The amount of money that he has spent in feeding over 50,000 poor children continuously in the city of Chicago is extraordinary. I could go on and on, but he's a great candidate for governor. He's a good man, and I believe that if we do our job as Democrats, he will be the next governor of the state of Illinois, and Lord knows we need a Democrat governor in the state of Illinois. Folks, I drove 200 miles to spend 20 minutes with you, so give me your ear. All right, and I promise you'll be out of here. We've got these great young people running for office here, the judge candidates, the congressional candidates, the state reps, and so on, and they deserve great credit for being in the arena. God love them. We need candidates like this, and they're good people. But I want to talk to you about my party. And I want to talk to you about my country, because that's what bothers me tonight when I see what's happening in the United States of America. In view of the dire circumstances in which our country finds itself as a result of the last presidential election, I feel compelled to share with you an experience which began for me and my party 40 years ago. In the early 1980s, as I traveled along Route 13 in my district from Harrisburg over to the Kentucky state line, I often took note of this beautiful little house sitting about a mile south of the highway on a knoll, from which there was this unobstructed vision, this clear view of this beautiful valley beyond. A valley of fertile fields, of woodlands, of streams, fading into the distance of the blue hills of the Shawnee. The house wasn't far from where I grew up. And occasionally, if I were passing near there at the end of the day, I would pull off the highway and I would drive up to that little house sitting on the hill just to watch the sunset behind the blue hills of the Shawnee. I still picture the beauty of it. That vision stays in my mind. And then one day, I was driving that stretch of highway, and I looked up toward that little house on the hill, and I saw the beginning of a slag pile from a nearby strip mine being formed directly across the road from that little house. And in succeeding days and months, the slag pile got larger and larger until the picture of that beautiful valley beyond, the fields, the streams, the woodlands, now even the blue hills were gone. They were still there, but they were no longer part of the vision of the people who lived in that little house. Now indulge me for a moment, if you will. Let me draw a parallel analogy with what has happened to my beloved country and my beloved party. During the years of the Roosevelt administration, the Kennedy administration, the Johnson administration, the enduring values of America's democratic institutions and the principles of the Democrat Party were one and the same. The great majority of people in America believed in a balanced budget with pay-as-you-go, not borrow and spend. They believed in equal educational opportunities for all of our children. They believed in unions, which had built the great middle class of America. They believed in equal justice before the law. They believed in protecting the most vulnerable among us. And based upon these principles, America prospered under Democrat leadership. The great battles that we fought in the 60s, the civil rights movement, the equal rights movement for our wives and daughters, the rights of our workers to organize and demand a larger piece of the American pie, the great society of Johnson that reached out to the poor, the disabled, the disenfranchised, and yes, even the protests to end the war in Vietnam spoke to a greater expansion and embracing of these democratic principles, not diminishing them. But during the 70s, a slight sense of something going wrong began to appear in the psyche of America. It began in the little country church in which I had grown up, along with generations of sons and daughters of coal miners and small farmers, Democrats to the core. Now the whispering campaign started in churches like ours all over America. Democrats can't be Christians. because they don't believe in prayer in school, and they don't believe in protecting the unborn. Two absolutely false propositions. As Democrats, we did not believe in mandatory prayer in public schools because it violates the Constitution, which says that we shall have no favored religion or favored prayers in our public schools. And we would not hold to violating that principle. But voluntary prayer in schools by individuals or groups has always been and will always be possible and permissible in America. And as Democrats, we believe that protection of the life does not stop at childbirth, but continues through every phase of childhood with good health care, good nutrition, and safety for our children. And Republicans don't believe that at all. Every phase of life is sacred. Nevertheless, the Republican propaganda machine had found a way to co-opt the evangelical movement in this country around these two issues, dividing Americans against each other, and the slag pile to obscure the vision of one America had begun in earnest. It wasn't long before the pile was added onto. The next campaign sought to convince Americans that Democrats were unpatriotic because they didn't defend the flag. This is yet another lie, dividing America. You heard John McCain's comments recently on the Vietnam War. He said, "We were drafting kids from the poorest families in America to fight the war, while the wealthy were paying doctors to find bone spurs to keep them out of service." You know who he's talking about. 5 deferments for this demagogue who parades around as if the military is a plaything at his disposal, saying, "my generals," as if they belong to him personally. It's always been the young men and women from the middle and low-income families of America who have fought our wars and defended our freedom and our flag, and by a large majority, they have come from Democrat families, and that is the truth. Mr. President, don't lecture me on defending the flag. I spent 3 years active duty in the United States Army, half of that time in Korea with the 1st Cav Infantry Division. I belonged to the American Legion, the VFW, AMVETS, and yet I was branded as anti-American by your Republican colleagues and had to run an entire congressional campaign where the flag was the only issue. But the propaganda has worked for them. We have been branded as not only unchristian, but unpatriotic. And the slag pile grows, and the vision becomes dimmer day by day. As America became more and more unionized, our prosperity grew. At the height of our economic power, over 40% of the workforce in America was union. No other country stood against us economically. The middle class was being built on union wages and benefits. People could buy homes, cars, a college education for their children. Businesses made good profits, providing health care to their employees. But then in 1981, a newly elected Ronald Reagan broke the Air Traffic Controllers Union and portrayed unions as the enemy of America. And the spiraling down of economic justice in this country had begun. Today, despite soaring corporate profits, 1 out of 4 corporations pay not 1 cent of federal taxes in America. And just 12% of our workforce is unionized, and there's been a race to the bottom of wages and benefits to the American worker. The notion that the Republican propaganda machine put forward 40 years ago, that unions were destructive of America's economic progress, is still in force today, and it is one more load on the slag pile to intentionally obscure our people's vision of the American dream. This tax package that they're trying to push through the Congress is nothing more than a massive transfer of wealth from the middle class to the already wealthy. These corporations did not move overseas because of high corporate taxes. That's a lie. They moved overseas because they can pay starvation wages to poor people, because they can escape any environmental responsibility for their pollution, and because they can export their products right back here into America and undercut the corporations that have tried to stay here and build products made in this country. This tax break will only pad the pockets of the corporations who already pay no taxes. My fellow Democrats, do not discount the success of the slag pile, because the master of the slag pile was elected President of the United States this past year. The propaganda was effective and may even have been helped along by Russia, an adversarial country whose only purpose is to destroy democracy here and around the world. And how was this newest layer on the slag pile accomplished? You just saw in testimony before a congressional committee this past week, the biggest social media corporations in America said that 150 million Americans viewed ads created by Putin and the communist government, ads meant to divide Americans against each other and elect Donald Trump as president. We can't stand for this, folks. I'll tell you how he got elected: by convincing enough of the American people that the Barack Obama administration failed America economically, and that Trump would make America great again. Do you know the last time America had a balanced budget? I'll tell you, under President William Jefferson Clinton, a Democrat. We're the ones that are fiscally responsible, not them. We were not only not going into debt, we were paying down the debt under President Clinton. We weren't deficit spending again. But after 2 wars by George W. Bush, we were borrowing trillions again on the back of the American taxpayer, and America going farther and farther into debt on the backs of our young generations to come. I was in Congress then. I know how good the economy was. Folks, remember this. In January of 2008, when Barack Obama took office, we were on the edge of a Great Depression. Banks were failing all over America. People were losing their homes by the thousands. The housing market was on its back. Automobile dealerships were closing. The stock market had gone from 14,000 to 6,000, and millions were losing their retirement incomes. Unemployment was pressing 10%. And when he left office, the unemployment rate was 4.6%. The stock market was over 18,000. The banking and housing industries had recovered. The automobile industry was thriving. People's 401ks had been restored and were growing. There was no talk of a potential depression, and we were respected by our allies abroad. That's what happened under Barack Obama's administration, and that's the truth. But the slag pile was alive and growing, completely obscuring the reality of America's progress. And today the deception continues. The slag pile grows even higher. Trump's admiration for Putin, his disregard of the Constitution, his dangerous and hateful rhetoric, his verbal assaults on women, his dismissal of climate change as fake science, his refusal to release his tax returns and eliminate conflicts of interest because he knows what the truth will reveal. This is the new normal. The slag pile is the new normal for the Republican Party and their leader. And so I ask you, fellow Democrats, when it comes to defending the great principles of our party and our democracy, on the principle of equal educational opportunity for all of our children, will you stand with Senator Menard of our party in his heroic effort to change an unequal educational system in our state? On the principle of economic justice in America, will you stand with the working men and women in our country who through their union membership seek to restore the balance between corporate profits and decent wages and benefits for their families? On the principle of equal justice before the law, will you stand with Senator Durbin in opposing the attempt by the Trump administration to destroy the voter registration laws of this country through their false claims of voter fraud, just to satisfy the president's ego and to further build the pile of slag? How many millions of lives have been sacrificed in this country's history to protect the most precious of all rights, the right to cast our vote, and now they want to tear it away from the poorest among us? And on the great principle of protecting the poor people of this country, will you stand with Senator Duckworth and our Democratic congressional members in the never-ending battle to oppose with every last ounce of their strength the repeal and the replacement of President Obama's Health Care Act and prevent the loss of health care coverage for 30 million Americans who are the poorest, most vulnerable on the face of this planet, while at the same time they want to give billions of dollars of tax cut to the wealthiest 1%. This is the most cruel layer of the slag pile yet, and this fight is not over. My fellow Democrats, this is not the time for the sunshine soldier. This is not the time for turning our heads and hearts away from the injustice that is enveloping America. This is not a time for playing it safe. This is a time for courage, not complacency. For only through your courage, your commitment to the great principles that has sustained us as a people, a balanced budget, equal educational opportunity for our children, a fair balance between profit and labor, equal justice before the law, and protecting the most vulnerable among us, only you can tear down this slag pile that obscures the vision of our people to be a united States of America. Democracy is at stake here. Do not think that it can't happen in America. In the 1930s and 40s, Germany, one of the most educated, most intelligent, most industrialized countries in the world, fell sway to a demagogue and saw their country completely destroyed. Listen to the words of Pastor Martin Niemöller, who led a revolt of German Lutheran ministers against Adolf Hitler and was imprisoned in the Dachau concentration camp. He said, "First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, but I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." In the words of one of America's greatest presidents, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. Democrats, do not fear. Do not condone with our silence what is happening to our beloved country and our beloved party. Stand up, speak out, tear down this slag pile of deceit and dishonor, and establish the true vision of America for the next generation of our children and our grandchildren. God love you. Thank you for having me here.